Which players have fallen the most in dynasty value over the last 30 days? We're talking about that in today's video. As always, guys, hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy dynasty content. We already have our dynasty risers video out for this month. And if you're new to this channel, we do this every single month where we look at the top risers and the top fallers over the last 30 days. This is according to keeptradecut. It's not a perfect tool. However, at least gives you a general idea how people are feeling about certain players and when to buy low, when to sell high. It's the most important thing in Dynasty, in my opinion. And we're starting off with the quarterback position as always. And we got Mr. Cam Ward. Cam Ward has fallen 3 spots from 14 to 17. He's been kind of floating in this mid-teens of quarterback rankings, which is kind of where he should be. But he is probably the least talked about, like, number one overall pick that's a quarterback. I know we had a couple times, or we had a left tackle as the number one overall pick, and people don't talk about left tackles, but he's a quarterback and just no one's really talking about him, which is probably a good thing for him. Less pressure, at least from the get-go. But it does kind of affect his dynasty value as well. This class was kind of pinned as like a notoriously bad quarterback class, and it was kind of Cam Ward and no one else, really, is how a lot of people felt. And the fact that we're not talking about him, his name's not in the news, I think has lowered his dynasty value in a weird way. We talk about this a lot on this channel, and to me, it's something that needs to get talked about more across dynasty content in general. It's just like the value that players, their perceived value, their artificial value that they have. The things that come from a likable person, to their name, to breaking out in year one, to, do they look like a wide receiver? Do they look like a quarterback type of thing? And all of these things. But anyways, Cam Ward, I think this is kind of where he should float around. Honestly, he's probably going to join this giant bucket of quarterbacks that we have right now, where they are good, good average to above average players, maybe even slightly higher than that, but they don't do a whole lot on the ground. I don't know what Cam Ward's going to do on the ground. I think he can, move more than maybe what he did in college in terms of those numbers. A lot of times you get quarterbacks and they don't need to run the ball as much in college. They can win with their arm. I expect him to float around 400 rushing yards, which is solid. It's not nothing, but it's also not like a difference making stuff. So he's probably going to join this giant bucket of quarterbacks that can do that, basically give you points with their arms, with their arm, Herbert, Stroud, Love, potentially McCarthy. We'll see Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, Michael Penix will probably be in that tier, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. So, this is where Cam Ward should be. And all that stuff that I mentioned, where like, yeah, the fact that we're not talking about him has hurt his value a little bit. If he comes out and just balls out in September, that's all going to go away pretty quickly. So, next up we have Anthony Richardson, and I'll be curious to see how much he actually falls. This is obviously coming out with the news of he has his shoulder injuries messed up again. I'm pretty sure he hurt his shoulder either last year or his rookie year. I can't remember. And it's bad news. It's bad. I've been maybe the number one supporter of buy low on Anthony Richardson, because if he hits, he's going to be incredible value. And I don't think that the thing about Anthony Richardson and what makes him appealing is that we don't have questions about, can he perform for fantasy if he's on the field. That's done. That's answered. We know he can perform when he's on the field. We know he's going to put up fantasy points. The question is he good enough to get on the field? Is he healthy enough to get on the field? But that's what makes him so intriguing, because you think about a guy like, let's say, Jackson Dart. Not only do we need him to get on the field, we need to know if he's going to be good for fantasy. And so we already have half the battle done with Anthony Richardson. The other half is just getting on the field. So I've been the biggest supporter of him and saying buy low on him. To me, he's the perfect like QB4 on your team, like to go out and get. I don't know if he's going to get on the field. The problem with him is that I just did a startup draft with one of our listener leagues. He still goes, still wins. in round 8, middle of round 8. So you still have to spend a pretty premium pick on him in a super flex league is the issue. So it's like buy low on him, but can you? Like I don't even know if you should at this point. I mean, maybe if he continues to fall. Tough for Anthony Richardson. Could be one of the bigger busts in the NFL of recent years. Into some running backs here, we have James Cook falling, which is to be expected as he holds out more and more. James Cook's an interesting one because I don't think when James Cook came into the league, I think we all expected him to produce in a way that to produce, but in a different way. Like he's producing in a way that I don't think we expected. I think we expected like a guy that could potentially catch 50 plus balls consistently each and every year and maybe get into like that 60, 70 range, which starts becoming like super elite. His yards per reception is actually really damn good. He averages 9.1 in his career. 10.1 in 2023 was his highest, but even his other years, he was over 8 yards per reception. That's really good. I mean, if you're over 8 for a running back, that's like starting to get good. If you're over like 9 or 10, that's like elite. That's like Austin Eckler, McCaffrey type of stuff. But the problem is he just doesn't get a lot of catches. Is it the nature of the offense or whatever? I don't know. 44 catches is the most he's had in his career, 2.6 receptions per game. I think we expected closer to 3 receptions per game for him. And he's only averaged 2 in his career. But he's doing it in ways that we didn't expect. 18 touchdowns last year. Now that number is going to come down whether he plays 17 games or not. That number should come down. I mean, it's ridiculous to think he can get 18 touchdowns. He's probably closer to like the regression to the mean of like well, his mean before that was like 4.5, which I think he's closer to like 10 to 12 on a good offense. That being said, if he holds out at all in training camp and stuff like that, it's going to really affect. We see it every single year. Guys who hold out for a majority of training camp, it affects them. It affects them the first 3-4 weeks, and honestly, guys, like the first 3-4 weeks is essential. It's a huge percentage of a huge percentage of the fantasy regular season. 4 weeks is a long time. 4 weeks is like just under a third of your fantasy regular season. So like it's going to affect him. It's going to increase injury risk. So I'm a little bit worried here. I mean, I know we're still it's June 9th when recording this, so you got to keep that in mind. But if he holds out, like he's going to continue to fall a little bit, and I don't blame it. That being said, like maybe it starts to become a little bit of a value slightly. I don't know if people are really selling James Cook. Like the people that have James Cook are selling low on him or something like that, or I think they're still kind of holding out hope that he's there. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with Buffalo and if they give him some kind of contract extension, a couple more years. I think they should. He's a good player that's produced his first few years, and he had his last 2 years he's averaged about 1,300 total yards and 12 touchdowns. So he's been pretty damn good his last 2 years. Tyrone Tracy is falling a little bit from 28 to 32. I've mentioned it many times. I think Cam Scadaboo wins and takes over this job. This just feels like a Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson type of thing where like, we didn't expect Antonio Gibson to get replaced by Brian Robinson necessarily, but he did, even though Antonio Gibson was highly productive his first 2 years. Antonio Gibson, his first couple of years in the season and in the league, he had over 1,000 total yards, 11 touchdowns. And then his second year, over 1,300 total yards, 10 touchdowns. He was, I believe, a top 20, top 15 running back on average those first 2 years. And then Brian Robinson comes in, and kind of takes over the job from him. Even though Brian Robinson's not this spectacular, talented guy, he kind of did all the things right. I mean, it's no shock to me that that Brian Robinson came in and kind of took over the job from him after the year after Gibson had 6 fumbles on 300 touches, which isn't like crazy high, but that's probably more than teams want. 6 fumbles. That can be the difference. If you do that in every single game, that can be the difference in 6 games. You know what I mean? So, I think, Tyrone Tracy kind of has a little bit of a fumbling issue as well. It makes sense for these converted wide receivers that don't have a lot of experience as running backs, like that they have a little bit of fumbling issues. Antonio Gibson had 5 fumbles on 230 touches, right? And so, that's a pretty high rate. And I guarantee you, with Brian Dayball, the kind of coach he is, and the situation he's in, where he's kind of on the hot seat, Tyrone Tracy, even if he's the starter, he fumbles that first game. Like Cam Scatterbo could just easily take over. I just think Cam Scatterbo's one of those running backs, kind of like a Brian Robinson, where he does everything right. He's tough between the tackles. He gets you the tough yards. He can willingly pass block. I don't know if he's good yet as a pass blocker, but he can willingly pass block, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of coaching up to do it. He breaks tackles. He's good at catching the ball, and if he doesn't fumble, I mean, we could be looking at a situation where Scadaboo just takes over this job, and I'm kind of higher on Scadaboo than most. I would say I'm a little bit higher on him. I think he takes over this job by week 4 or 5, and it's kind of his. So we'll see if that comes true. But I still think Tracy could be like usable in deeper leagues. But I think I would kind of sell at this RB3 value, because I think it's very likely that like Tyrone Tracy kind of goes the path a little bit of a Antonio Gibson, where it's like, yeah, like he still has stats. You still hear his name. He's still usable maybe in deeper leagues, but ultimately, Antonio Gibson, after his first couple of years, 900 total yards, 650 total yards, and then last year 750. When you're catching 40, 45 passes, you could be a spot starter. I think that's kind of potentially what Tracy becomes. Tajay Spears is also falling. I kind of mentioned this. I made a video about the rookie that the Titans, I believe, drafted in the 6th round, Khalil Mullings, and kind of mentioned, like, is there something here with Khalil Mullings? Because you look at the Titans depth chart, you have Tony Pollard, you have Tajay Spears, you have Julius Chestnut, who people don't even realize that's a real name and a real running back in the NFL, and then you have Khalil Mullings, and to me, it feels like Pollard and Spears are a little bit of a carbon copy of each other. That they're a little bit redundant in that sense of like, and I think this team likes Pollard more. I think just because they went out, they paid him a bunch of money, and when Pollard was healthy, basically whenever Pollard was healthy, he was getting the majority of the touches. It was going to Pollard, and Tajay Spears had a couple big games, when Pollard was hurt and injured and stuff like that. But I think this team likes Pollard more. And it kind of makes me think, like, is Khalil Mullings going to be a little bit more of like the RB2 for this team, where like Spears is more, if something happens to Pollard, Spears will be the number one guy. But if Pollard's healthy, that they use a guy like Khalil Mullings, a big bruising running back that can, really do damage, because I think maybe around the goal line and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know about Tajay Spears. I don't know. Is he going to be, are they going to use him more because of how he finished the year? Is it going to be more the Tony Pollard show? I mean, again, you just kind of look at some of the numbers that Tajay Spears was putting up the beginning of the season. 4 carries, 4 catches, 32 total yards. 6 carries, 2 catches, 31 total yards. 2 carries, 4 catches, 61 total yards. 15 carries. I don't know if Pollard was out that game. 2 catches. 6 carries, 0 catches. Like, not usable stuff. Not usable stuff. And then he goes off, to end the year, where he scores a bunch of touchdowns and things like that. So it's tough to know with Tajay Spears. I think I would cash out on him around this. If someone offered me equivalent value to what I think he should get around this, RB3 range, I think I would just cash out. I really do. And then finally, at the running back position, we have Braylon Allen from 39 to 43. I kind of was on, I was a little bit on this train even when they were drafted last year. I know everyone drafted and targeted Braylon Allen in rookie drafts last year, thinking he was the RB2 behind Breece Hall. And I kind of took the approach of like, well, I think I'm just going to go for Isaiah Davis, because Isaiah Davis was drafted a round or 2 later. I forget if it was 5th or 6th round for Isaiah Davis. I know it was 4th round for Braylon Allen. And he's going undrafted in every single rookie draft. And then when Breece Hall missed the time, I think 1 or 2 games last year, and everyone thought Braylon Allen was absolutely going to smash. I know it came out, Braylon Allen was kind of the primary backup to to Brees Hall. But then when Brees Hall got hurt, Isaiah Davis was actually more productive. I think Brees Hall, I think Braylon Allen played slightly more, but it was kind of a 50-50 split. Now, I know it's a whole new coaching staff in there, but I still think there's a very good chance that Isaiah Davis is just the better running back than Braylon Allen, a very good chance. And so I kind of want to get out of Braylon Allen personally. That could be a huge mistake because he could increase in value, especially if they're going to use multiple running backs and actually give Braylon Allen significant carries. But I think there's also too much of a chance that Isaiah Davis is actually just better and he's the better RB2 that I wouldn't. There's too much of a risk for that in my mind that I would probably cash out on him. I know some people are going to disagree with that, and that's totally fine. And I'm acknowledging that that could be that I could be wrong, but I just want to throw that out there. Like I wouldn't be shocked if we come out and it's like, oh crap, it's Isaiah Davis, it's not Braylon Allen. So just keep that in mind. Into some wide receivers, starting off with Chris Olave, who's falling. This is probably because of the Carr news and not really knowing what's going to go on with New Orleans and is it Tyler Shuck or Rattler or Jake Hayner and even if it's any of those three, is that a good thing? Like it doesn't sound like a good thing. Chris Olave is frustrating because like we're going into what year 4 now. We're going into year 4. There's a very good chance this offense is just god awful. Very good chance. There's a good chance it's better than we think. There's a decent chance, but there's a very good chance that this is a bottom third, bottom 7 type of offense, maybe even like worse than that. And then we go into 4 years of Chris Olave where like we know the guy is talented, but at some point we're just like he hasn't shown it on the field for fantasy production. I shouldn't say we know we do know he's talented, but we don't know if he can take it to that next level. 70 catches, 80 catches, 1,100 yards is not going to do it to be that's fine in deeper leagues, but that's not where we expected Olave to be when guys get drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. And when they come out and have 2 good seasons to start off their career, we expect, or at least 1 good season, we expect them to get into that elite category, these league winners. Many of you play in a lot of shallow leagues. And by shallow, I mean you play in 10 or 12 team leagues and you're starting 8 or starting 9 in those leagues where you're starting, a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, right? That's 6, a super flex, 7, and then maybe like 1 or 2 flexes. If you play in those type of leagues, wide receiver 20, wide receiver 24, although they're nice to have and people might think they're valuable, unless you have multiple guys that are like top 5 at their position, top 7 at their position, Jamar Chases, Jeffersons, Pukas, Bijans, guys like that. It doesn't matter if you have a team full of Chris Olave, so you're not going to win. Now, he's fine if you do have those guys. He's a good supplemental piece. But guys like Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, Jordan Addison even, like they're good players, but in these shallower leagues, they don't win you leagues. You need those top 5, 7 guys. And so we don't know what Chris Olave is. We think he's better. It reminds me a lot of DJ Moore or Terry McLaurin, where it's just like, we know these guys are good. They just need to get into the right situation at the right time. We saw it with DJ Moore that one year. I think he was top 10. We just saw it last year with Terry McLaurin. I know McLaurin had another season where he was like top 12 or 15, but like we know these guys are good. And if they played on another team, like the Rams or something, that they would be putting up, huge numbers. They're just so frustrating, man. These receivers are so frustrating. But I think I'm double checking. I feel like I put the wrong number there for Olave. Let me double check there. Yeah, I wrote the wrong number there. It should be wide receiver 26 to 30. So he's ranked right around wide receiver 30. I just don't know where. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel for Olave, unfortunately, because of the situation he's in. Brandon Ayuk from 34 to 38. And Brandon Ayuk's an interesting one because, like, man, we were quick to just like be out on Brandon Ayuk. He at one point, I probably when he got the contract or after his 2023 season, I mean, he was as high. I'm just looking back now. He got as high as a top 15 guy. I think the highest he ever got was wide receiver 12. Wide receiver 12 and stuff like that. No, even higher. Wide receiver 9. So he's a guy that like got pretty high Yeah. And then he has a contract dispute, plays poorly in when he comes back, and then tears his ACL. I forget how severe his ACL was, but is there a world where like we are overreacting slightly, like to Brandon Ayuk tearing his ACL, and maybe we should say like, hey, this is still a guy who's 27 years old on a really good offense. Yeah, he might miss a few games in the beginning, but when he comes back, he's going to be the best wide receiver on the 49ers, and he's going to do similar stuff to what he did, a couple of years ago. There's definitely a world where this is true. Um, I'm kind of avoiding Ayuk and trading for him straight up or anything, but if I can get him as part of another trade, that's kind of how I'm approaching it. That being said, like, Ayuk is needs to be incredibly efficient. And it's just so hard for wide receivers to maintain fantasy relevant, I'm talking top 12, top 15 type of fantasy seasons when they're not catching more than 80, 85 passes. And Ayuk, even in his best year, which was 2023, he only caught 75 passes. Now he was incredibly efficient with those. Um, he basically had the same receptions per game as he did in 2022. The issue or the difference is that he averaged like 5 more yards per reception. It's so hard to really maintain that type of yards per reception number. So I'm kind of avoiding Ayuk right now, but I'm not selling him if he's on my team. I'm not buying him, but I'm not selling him if he's on my team because I think there's a pretty good chance that he increases in value and he gets a little bit back more towards how we were valuing him after the 2023 season. Last wide receiver here is Keon Coleman from 43 to 46. I was never a big Keon Coleman guy, but there are a decent amount of wide receivers from last year that I think are fine to get as like a throw in or like even buy low on. Guys like Keon Coleman. Guys like Xavier Legette is another one. Even Ricky Pearsall to a certain extent. There's some guys in there that didn't really show out last year that we're just so impatient as dynasty players. We need people to hit year one or else like we're kind of out on them that I think like could still break out. They still could, sometimes it still takes guys 2-3 years to develop. And so Keon Coleman is a guy, a pretty good guy to bet on. If people are undervaluing him a little bit, he's 22 years old. He's paired with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I know they kind of spread the ball around and all of that, but like, could it be a situation where they just didn't have that elite receiver and that's why they were spreading the ball around? And does Keon Coleman take that next step? Again, just turned 22. So like he was playing last year as like a young 21-year-old guy. That's pretty young. And before he got hurt, Keon Coleman, before he got hurt, he had a 4 or 5 game stretch. He had a 5 game stretch before the game in which he got hurt, where he was averaging 5 targets, 3 catches, 60 yards a game, and he had 2 touchdowns. So nothing to like that's gonna blow you out of the water or anything. But like averaging 60 yards a game over a 17 game season puts you at over 1,000 yards. So he was on for that before he got hurt. I think it was his hand. He was on a pace for like over 1,000 yards over a 17 game stretch. He wouldn't have hit 1,000 unless he like took it up to the next level there. But like, if you're putting up 800-900 yards your rookie year, we would have a lot bigger or brighter outlook on Keon Coleman, right? We would. And like, again, it wasn't a terrible rookie year for him. He averaged 42.3 yards per game, right? He averaged 42.3 yards per game. It was just, he didn't do anything for fantasy, but he was on a over 700 yards per game pace, right? Over 700 yards per game pace. He was going to catch 5 touchdowns. And, I think the receptions is what really turns us off on him a little bit. But, he was on pace for like only 40 catches or something. So like a solid rookie season, not terrible, but not great, not even kind of slightly above average. So I don't know. My point being is like there's always going to be these guys who after year one they're okay, and then we drop them in value that still could break out. Think of the Nico Collinses of the world. Into some tight ends here, and we'll kind of get through these a little bit quicker. Kyle Pitts, man, if you ever wonder why we put value into highly drafted players, is because like even Kyle Pitts, like who has really not done anything fantasy relevant since his rookie year. I know he's been like tight end 11 one of those other years, but hasn't done anything really that relevant since his rookie year. Is still like in the top 12 for tight ends, right? Because of potential, because of what we were told, greatest tight end prospect to ever come out, blah, 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 top 4 pick, whatever he was. And, you know, his nickname's the unicorn. This is why we value these guys, because they just have so much staying power, as we see by Kyle Pitts. I mean, Kyle Pitts has been fine for a tight end the last couple of years, 50 catches, 650 yards. That's like the baseline for tight ends. I always talk about it. My baseline for a tight end is like, can you give me 50 catches, 550 yards? We'll see about touchdowns. And Kyle Pitts has done that the last couple of years. I think it's just going to take him to get on another team. It just doesn't seem like it's gonna play out. But I mean, again, like what if Kyle Pitts gets traded to the Chiefs? People are gonna be stoked. People are gonna increase his value. So like that's the power of like when you're drafted this high, you have a lot of staying power. Even if you kind of been a little irrelevant the last 3 years. Also it's the tight end position, so we're never really that excited about the tight end position. Jake Ferguson, from 14 to 18. I don't know if this is in response to Pickens. I was pretty excited about Ferguson, obviously, when it was just Lamb. I'm still pretty excited about Ferguson. Year 3, as the starter, that is. Last year, if you actually look at his stats last year, they weren't that far off from his 2023 numbers. He averaged the exact same receptions per game, 4.2. Now, he missed 3 games, so that's why he has less receptions, but he was on pace for 71 catches, which is exactly what he had in 2023. He averaged about 9 yards less per game, almost 10 yards less per game as well. So, that's significant enough. That's a point per game less in yards. But his receptions and yards weren't that far off. He just had 0 touchdowns, which is a little unusual because like in 2023, yeah, he had 5 touchdowns, but he was also like one of the most heavily targeted players in the red zone. I actually think like he's one of those guys. I think his baseline, if he's healthy all year, is that I'd be shocked if he doesn't have 55 to 60 catches, 550 to 700 yards, and then we'll see about touchdowns. And Pickens could just make the offense better and could give him more touchdown opportunities. So I don't really change too much how I feel about Jake Ferguson as I try to avoid his hand in my face. And I think there's a lot of tight ends that are kind of buy lows, as same with the next one. Not necessarily buy lows, but like tear downs. Like I would happily tear down from Tucker Kraft to Jake Ferguson, get a bunch of get some pieces in return on top of Ferguson, and roll with Ferguson, thinking I wouldn't be surprised if Ferguson is just better than Tucker Kraft. I'm not going to put money on it, but I wouldn't be surprised. Same thing with this next guy in Pat Freiermuth. I wouldn't be shocked if I actually think Pat Freiermuth is like an incredible tier down option. I'm not 100% sure why he's dropping. I mean, they got rid of Pickens and they brought in Rodgers. Like that should be a plus for Freiermuth, but he's fallen a bit. I don't know. Maybe the Rodgers thing hasn't really kicked into the rankings yet, but I think we're going to see Pat Freiermuth's best season. And like, I was trying to think about this. Is Pat Freiermuth like, and I could be completely just missing someone. I don't think I am, but like, is Pat Freiermuth like the best tight end that Aaron Rodgers has played with? And again, I could be completely drawing a blank on someone in particular, but I don't really remember a big time tight end for the Packers all those years. Like I'm just going back and look, they had Jermichael Finley, who was a solid tight end there for a little bit, but I don't think he was like, an amazing tight end that was for sure better than Pat Freiermuth. Like, maybe someone early on in Rodgers' career that I'm playing, that I'm missing, but just kind of quickly looking through like the mid 2010s right now, like there's no one that's really jumping off the page. I know he had Robert Tonyan catch like 10, 12 touchdowns that one year, but look at what Robert Tonyan's done since then. Like he's not a great tight end. Richard Rodgers, like, Conklin, last year. I think Conklin's a little bit underrated, but I would say that Freiermuth is better than Conklin. Um, I, my point being here is we're looking at a situation where like Pat Freiermuth could easily be the second best receiving option for the Steelers. Go look at the Steelers depth chart. Their wide receiver 2 right now is Robert Woods on their depth chart. And like you don't see a whole lot that could. You have Calvin Austin, who he has his role. He's the deep threat guy, right? Roman Wilson is a complete wild card. We hope he's going to be good, but he's a complete wild card. Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek, like there's a very good chance like we get a very good season from Pat Freiermuth, and I don't understand why he's falling. He's definitely a guy that I want to go out and get. We've seen him kind of be that baseline type of tight end, those 50, 55, 65 catches, 65 catches, 650 yards, 7 touchdowns. To me, that's kind of baseline for Pat Freiermuth. That was with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think Rodgers is probably a better passer slightly than those, than Russell Wilson or significantly. I don't know, but I don't know. I just see a guy that could like his baseline to me is like low end tight end 1, and there's a chance for him easily to be a top 5 tight end where we stand right now. Anyways, appreciate everyone. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, join our Discord. It is free, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.